This must be the third or fourth time I'm speaking here. So this should tell you how much I enjoy coming here, even in the rain and the cold and all of that. So lovely to be here. We're going to be talking about collaboration. And in terms of talking to fellow human beings, let's start with that. Our topic is collaboration and really how to make it possible. So what I'm curious to hear, and I just want you guys to do a little bit of thinking and sharing, is what concerns about collaboration really motivated you to attend this session? Just take a minute. Share with a neighbor, and then I'll ask a few of you to share. So let's hear from a few of you. And we're going to have our mic runners help you be heard, which apparently is a bit of a challenge with my microphone, so I hope you can hear me well. Who would like to go first? Go ahead.
I work in the medical device industry. I'm actually a quality consultant, but I'm very, very interested in the application of Agile. In the medical device area, you've got people of a variety of different focus areas, people who focus on risk management, safety issues, people who focus on usability, which is not the same as UX, because there's a safety element in that. People who focus on design. There's, in some kinds of medical device software, you're also dealing with having to fit it to the appropriate piece of hardware and the issues around all of that, or having to deal with how you're handling data, whether you put it up into a cloud particular. There's all kinds of different perspectives that have to be brought into years ago, the guy said, well, when we're doing our risk management, our clinical people are frequently not at the table. And I'd say, why not?
Okay. Who else has a situation with collaboration that you'd like to have it, but it's not happening, or some other concern? Who else would like to share with us? David.
So I'm working with people who can gain a lot if they would collaborate more often, but the culture tends to look at people who ask for help as showing weakness, and if they do things alone, they can be stars.
Okay.
They're in a group.
I'm seeing people nodding. Yeah. Seeing several people nodding here. Resonates with you, right? Yeah. Okay, one more in the back. And the mic is next to you.
I understand what David said, but I think it's important for us as Agile practitioners to realize that team members swarm. The best team members pair up and do tasks within stories, and that's how teams will be self-sufficient and help each other out. And I understand what David said about today's society, what they want.
Yeah.
They want people that form on their own, on solo.
Right.
But Agile is to take a step back, and we swarm, and we can perform better and achieve our points better and our objectives better if we swarm and pair up.
Right. It's a critical piece in Agile, right? Collaboration. Okay. Before I tell you what my experience is, do you guys agree with this statement? Is collaboration a good thing? Right. Few people ever disagree with that. Okay. In my experience, though, few teams actually enjoy that or experience that. So, right. And what's even worse is that they don't always know why that is. Right. So they can tell that their team is not collaborating much, but sometimes it's hard to know why that is, and subsequently what to do about it. And so, I've been involved in Agile work for almost 20 years. So part as a practitioner, manager, and so on in software. I've been coaching, training, consulting for about 15 years now. But even before all of that, something that I often did was look at how and if and when people actually work with each other. Maybe that's how I ended up in this career. Fine. And so what I'm going to share with you today really goes back to what must be like, 30 years of observations. And so here's what we're going to cover. We're going to start with just a couple of definitions. Sometimes people confuse collaboration and cooperation. Some of you know I'm originally from Israel. And my native language does not make a difference. Does not make a distinction, right? Okay, does not make a distinction between these two words. We only have one, but they mean something else. So we're going to look at that. What we really mean by collaboration as opposed to sort of the more default mode that we have in organizations, which is cooperation. Then I'm going to share with you 9 prerequisites for any two people to even consider collaborating. So 9 conditions that kind of need to be satisfied in a given situation for 2 or more people to work collaboratively. And even after all of that, there's going to be 6 deterrents, all sorts of cues and pressures and the environment and the culture, things like that discourage people from collaborating. After all of this, we'll tie this together to a process that you will start applying here to basically think through the situation you have and see what you can do about it, right? So I want to give you, I call it the process, but it's basically just a few thinking steps so that you can kind of break the ice on this one a little bit, break the concrete. Okay, so in terms of the definitions, when I ask people what does collaboration mean, I usually get the top line. We work together, we have a shared objective. There are various definitions for collaboration. This is the one I like. And what makes it special here is not so much that we talk to each other. It's not so much that we are involved, but we look at the result, the deliverable, the end result, and we're saying, we're all owners. So it's not 50-50 necessarily. It could be anything. But we go into the task feeling that we both, or all of us, we own it. And here are a few examples. So what you see on the top left, that's pair programming. Okay? Pair programming is a case of collaboration. It is not defined by having a single computer and a single screen. It is defined, and 2 people. It is defined by 2 people working on a task together and owning it together, right? What you see on the bottom left is a case of mobbing. So show of hands, who has heard about mob programming, right? It's well known these days. These are not programmers, these are BAs, 5 of them. So that's a team I coached in Edmonton, and one day they just said, we have this task coming up, let's just do it together. That was mobbing, right? So they got in a room and figured it out. The sword notwithstanding, that's a stand-up. Right, so daily stand-up in the top right corner. A daily stand-up is supposed to be a collaborative activity. It's not a status meeting. That came up in my previous talk at A&E. So the team gets together and together decides what to do next and how they will work together to make the best of the next 24. Okay? Now, in this talk, I'm going to share with you a whole bunch of examples, some of them from software development, many of them from Agile, some not at all, including the one at the bottom right. So one thing I really like to do when I don't coach and train and such is I do adventure races. So if anybody's seen The Amazing Grace on TV, there's a weekend-long version of it, which I've done 4 times. These are the people who put it on. That is the charity that I fundraise for. It's for kids in Ontario. And these are 12 people, totally volunteers, totally self-organizing collaborative team. So while they do specialize, right? So for instance, the tall guy in the back, he runs the camera. Okay? He posts to Facebook. He does the live stream. He records people. But when others need help, he can pitch in. And when he is swamped, they can help him. So there are specialties, but they all pitch in for each other. So it's a totally collaborative team, not just, I do this and nothing else. You don't touch it, right? Never that experience. So very much a collaborative team. This is cooperation. There still is a shared objective. But it's kind of big and remote. And so we just do our pieces. We have parts. So the relay race is the classic example of cooperation because you got 4 people in the race. Every runner has exactly one job to do, which involves 3 tasks. Get the baton, run fast, pass it on. Don't drop it. And at that point, their job is done. They cannot collaborate. It's not part of the game. There's really nothing else they can do. So that's cooperation. And unfortunately, in too many companies, we do the exact same thing. We pass the baton around. The baton might be requirements, it might be code, it might be test plans, and so on. So we might get cooperation. I mean, we could also get some solo work. Cooperation basically means that we kind of play nice together, but we still do our piece. Okay. So what would you say? Why should we collaborate? Why is it a good thing? Mark? Oh, just be loud.
Yeah, because it results in high reliability. You've got all those brains looking at the same work, and it's unlikely they'll all make the same mistake at the same time.
It helps with mistakes. Okay, good. Anyone else? Why should we collaborate? Yes?
It brings synergy. It's like 1 + 1 = 3
But why is that?
because it's so healthy and there is high level of trust.
Trust?
Transparency.
Okay. Okay. Brian?
Ideas come from different directions.
Okay. We got different ideas. We're limited in our individual capacities. Sometimes we make mistakes and so on. Generally, when I ask people why would we collaborate, I get this answer. It's the obvious answer, right? So we heard this here as well, and it's correct. However, there's another angle as well. In the 20-odd years of this global, uncontrolled, crazy experiment called Agile, we have learned what it's like when people collaborate and when they don't. So pre-Agile, we knew exactly what would happen if people don't collaborate, and we set them up not to collaborate, those resources. And we learned a few things along the way, so that when people work on their own, we are likely to get these effects. Right? So when you work on your own, you might misunderstand the task, lack information, and so on and so forth. Right? This stuff happens. Right? Quick show of hands. Who here sees at least one of these every day? Okay. Thank you. What's common to them?
Single viewpoint.
Right, but that's because they're working on their own. But what's common to these risks?
What's common to them are people not listening to others aside from themselves.
Okay.
Not the waste generation.
Sorry, what?
The waste generation, it generates lots of waste.
It generates waste, right? So we don't want this, for sure. But why does it happen? And it's actually the first word in what you said, which is people. We employ human beings. This stuff will happen with human beings. It doesn't with resources. I hate this word with a passion, in case you haven't figured that out. Okay? So we'll get that one out of the way. So Agile takes a very interesting angle. It says, look, we employ human beings. That's a risky thing. How do we mitigate that risk? Well, we put them in teams that self-organize and that collaborate. Okay? So this is why it's such a big principle in Agile. However, it doesn't follow that you have to collaborate all the time. Some work does not justify collaboration. So what you should really have is some kind of balance, which depends on a bunch of factors, between collaboration, cooperation, and solo ownership. Now, I'm guessing that most of you are here because you have too much of the stuff on the right and less of the stuff on the left. So, again, we don't mean to amplify collaboration to 100%, but let's see what we can do about it. Now, before we continue with, well, how to think about this, please take a minute to do what the slide says. So the reason I asked you to do this is because we're going to be talking about an abstract concept here, right? Collaboration is kind of abstract. You can kind of tell when you see it, but it's all abstractions. So I wanted you to have at least a specific case that you can sort of start applying in your mind what I'm going to show you, okay? So 9 prerequisites. Now, a few things about them. This is all my work. This is not from a book. This is not scientifically proven. It's just been my experience working with so many teams since I started the Agile coaching part of my career. And I keep seeing evidence for this, but again, this is not some scientific theory that you should now go and cite. So take it with a grain of salt. What I think is happening here is that these 9 prerequisites operate as sequential filters. I'm going to show them to you in a specific sequence. And I think what happens is that when two people are in a situation that might benefit from collaboration, they run through those filters in their minds, subconsciously and very, very fast. They look at the first one. Passes, good. Second one, passes, good. Third one, doesn't, I'm going to do my thing. Right, and so on until they get to the 9th one. They apply to each member of the situation. So I'm going to be talking about 2 people just to make this simple, but it applies to any group. Okay, and it applies to each member of the group. And what's even more painful is that they apply even if you already have a team that's generally functional. So it does not experience those 5 dysfunctions of the team and whatever. It has a shared objective, works towards it, but still doesn't enjoy a whole lot of collaboration. So you will see this in action. Here's the first one. So the very first condition or prerequisite is that people need simply compelling reasons to join forces. Whether that is cooperation or collaboration, there needs to be a good reason. So what you see here on the left are some reasons that have to do with the result. So things like, I need help or not sure I'm up to it. And what you see on the right are things that are beyond the result, like having fun or growing the team or just, building some sort of experience. And I want to give you an example. Many of you know Johanna Rothman, who's local, right? And every year, she and I teach a workshop for transformation leaders. So we get people who lead organizational transformations, and we do basically a workshop around all the stuff that they can do and stuff that goes wrong. She can do this on her own, and I can do this on my own. Yet we have chosen to work together because we believe that together our participants get much higher value. We believe it's more fun. It has turned out to be more fun. It's nicer not to be alone. We kind of sing from the same book, and so on. Even though there are some consequences to us. We need a bigger class and whatever. And so we have a compelling reason to join forces. I'm wondering who here, you're thinking about the situation that you chose just a moment ago, and you're thinking, you know what? The reason those people are not collaborating is that. Anyone? A bunch of nods here. Okay. Would anybody like to share what's going on? How that is an explanation? Anyone we haven't heard from yet? You can be brave. Or not? Okay, so we'll move on. Oh, we have somebody over there.
I think people just don't see the reasons. That you have to help them realize the reasons. That there might be the reasons there, but they see that their work is distinct, especially development and QA.
Mm-hmm.
Thus I don't need to join forces, right?
Right, and the work is even designed that way, right? It's designed so that one person can do a part, and that's all they need to do. That's their accountability, right? Okay, second reason, the second condition. They have reasons. The reasons need to justify collaboration as opposed to cooperation. And what you see here, after you parse the top left license plate, which usually gives people some headaches, that says great designer. That is a counterexample, right? People self-identify with their roles. So it's not just the task at hand. It's like, we have there like, a PHP guy. I do PHP. You want Java? Not me, right? And on it goes. I want to give you a positive example of where that condition applies. Who here has done an escape room? I'll explain. Those who have done know it, right? So if you've done an escape room, you know what it is. It's basically a set of puzzles inside a room. And the big idea is that you need to escape the room by solving the puzzles. Now, escape. I mean, the door's open. Okay, there's a fire code. Okay, it's not locked. Okay, but the big idea is that they tell you some funny story, and you're like, you have to escape the place. Now, usually escape rooms are for 4 or 6 people. Okay, because it's really hard for any one person to do all the puzzles on their own. Trust me, I've tried. because I'm weird that way. I like to go with my family, so with my wife and our twins, and we always choose, before we go in, to solve everything together. Now I can tell you, the really good puzzlers who really work well at escape rooms, they don't do that. They split up. They split up. Maybe one will do one puzzle, another person will do another, if the room allows it. Sometimes they don't. Maybe they'll work in little pairs, and that's it. Because their idea is to maximize resource utilization, really. Not for us. We want the fun, we want the family experience, we want to learn from each other, we want to tell stories about this afterwards. So we say, we want to collaborate. Hey, that's jumped too far ahead. So we have a reason to collaborate, okay? Even if it sometimes means that we don't escape, and that's okay. It's funny how after the first time ever that I gave this talk, a week later, I got an email from one of the participants who said, so last weekend I went with my family to an escape room, we did exactly what you said, and we escaped in 45 minutes. So maybe it's a good tip, I don't know, next time you go. All right. The third precondition, or prerequisite, is if we collaborate, we must believe that the other person can actually make a valuable contribution and will be there all the way to the end. Counterexample, how we divvy up back-end and front-end development. What most teams do, which is unfortunate, what most teams do is they'll have their front-end devs do what kind of work? Front-end, right? And back-end do back-end. They do not cross. And so even if, theoretically, they could collaborate because, well, let's face it, they are developers, okay? And that means a whole lot. They cannot assume that their counterparts will be there to the end because essentially they have their own tasks and they work on their own track, even though we might capture everything on the same board. And what's even worse is that quite often, and I hear this and it just bugs me so much, I will hear from front-end developers that, this back-end dude, he can help me. He doesn't know anything about front-end. Which is such a lie, because ultimately, you need to think complexity, and you need to know systems, and you need to think design, and side effects, and things like that. All stuff that good developers do anyway, right? So it's a bit of a false situation there. The positive example of where we have this, the precondition is met. So I mentioned the race. This is the guy I race with. The first time we raced together, I had known him for maybe like 8-9 months. But it turned out that he's the best partner for me in this. So of course he'll be there to the end because they don't really let us off halfway through. But in the race, they throw us into so many challenges. Again, if you've ever seen The Amazing Race on TV, you'll know the variety. This is the kind of thing. And so we have to complement each other, right? He has to have skills that I don't and vice versa, right? And I have chosen to keep racing with him every year and not with other people, because everybody else I know probably can't do this. Okay. So the matter of psychological safety has been making the rounds recently, right? And we always talk about this in the context of Agile teams, and it is huge. And yes, it's critical for Agile and this and that, but that's not what we're talking about here. While collaborating, I should afford to be vulnerable, such as say silly things or, goof or whatever. And there's also the matter of afterward, where people speak honestly about my contribution, okay? So I might feel safe in the exchange, but afterwards, they might go behind my back if something happened there. I had a team like this once. So I joined the bioinformatics team, many, many years ago. And there were 2 people on that team who did not get along. And after a meltdown, in a truce, they still didn't collaborate, even though they kind of buried the hatchet. And I think that had to do with not quite trusting the other person to not go later to me as the manager and complain about them. So very much a kind of, I don't feel safe around you. Is anybody here thinking, the situation that you picked, that explains it? That explains why people are not collaborating? You want to share? You don't have to. Okay, that's fine. Yes? With the mic, please.
So this is actually very useful because it sort of, I think the situation is one in which a higher up feels that they can't make themselves vulnerable by asking for opinions from other people.
So collaboration across the ranks. Yeah, absolutely. There's a related one, being treated fairly. So when you think about it, nowadays companies hire for fit. And so they really want to make the environment, kind of good and for people to feel like they belong. Leaders credit teams. Leaders will say, the team did this. And team members will say, yeah, we did this. There's a lot of we. But sometimes the contribution is not equal, and it is very much not equal. And people might not feel very happy about, getting the same kind of credit as somebody else. My son experienced this. 2 years ago in 9th grade, there was a chemistry assignment. Teacher said to buddy up. He went with a friend of his. They had like 3 weeks to do this. 1 week in, he comes to me and he says he's not doing anything. I said, have you talked to him? Well, teenager, right? Yeah, I talked to him, whatever, okay. Have you talked to the teacher? Oh, whatever. Eventually he did what any sensible kid would do, is just finish the task, right? So he finished the assignment and handed it in, and he was a little mad, but he was even madder when both of them got the same grade. And it was a good one. And he said, he got like a 95 or something for something that I did. Even though that's a friend of his. And I actually asked him after, will you ever work with him again? He said, no. So if you ever have the situation at work where you have an unequal contribution, but you really paint everybody with the same brush, for good, presumably, you might end up with the situation of like, but as the one who contributes more, I'm not being treated fairly. Now, I'm not talking about praise, and I'm not talking about Starbucks gift cards and all of those things that you should not do. Okay? But I am talking about recognition and acknowledgement. Even a simple thank you can make the difference. So there's that. Okay. Now, in order for us to collaborate, we don't have to love each other. We're not moving in together. But we do have to kind of, sort of enjoy each other's company. Now, again, that's another reason why companies try to make the work experience really fun and friendly and whatnot, and not just, a row of cubicles. Do those even still exist? Does anybody? Yeah? Jeez. Anyway. So companies try that, and even if everything is, kind of open and friendly and whatever, what if we really don't enjoy the experience? And I have an example just like that. So I mentioned puzzles because of escape rooms. So 4 or 5 years ago, my wife and I discovered that there's a whole world of puzzling with word puzzles and logic puzzles. And actually, the epicenter is in Boston due to the universities. And we went to a convention. So 220, let's face it, geeks, descended on the Revere Hotel, and we solved puzzles from 10 a.m. to like 2 a.m. for 4 days. And I couldn't get enough. Most of the action starts after midnight. One day, the action, right? It's all paper. One day, they said, okay, so did anybody bring puzzles from home? And a few people broke them up and like, okay, let's do stuff. And one guy said, I brought something. It's meant to be solved by 2 people. So not single solving, but pair solving. Wow. For me, all the 5 preconditions were met because I was there. I knew those people were levels above me. I could learn from them. This could be great. The whole valuable participation thing, of course. Safety, they don't know me. It's all fine. So I sat down with this guy, and we started solving, and we're making progress that I could tell I would not be making on my own. And half an hour in, and I'm thinking, I'm not enjoying this. The guy doesn't seem to have registered that I even exist. And like, I don't know if it's me or him, but I don't want to be here. So I kind of, said I'm going to sleep. It was like 1 a.m. And that was it. And whenever there was pair solving later and later conventions, I steer clear of him. And again, you might have the same thing in the office. You might have the same thing in the office where some people make the experience of working with them not terribly pleasant, so other people just kind of stay away. Okay? Now, we like to think that everybody is professional and respectful and adult and, nice. But, yeah. Okay. All right. So people need to co-create the experience of working together. That means what? That means that if they're going into a collaborative situation, they need to be able to say, how are we going to do this? Are we going to be sitting at your computer? Do we want to share a screen? Do we want to screen mirroring? Do we just want to go to a whiteboard like these guys are doing? That's a self-organizing Agile leadership team. Who's going to do what? The thing is, you don't want the collaboration to be only on one person's terms. When I teach Agile engineering, like how developers can become Agile developers, I always do exercises and people work in pairs. And I tell people between exercises, you switch pairs. And there are always several people who stay put and wait for others to come to them. And they will work on their laptops in their IDE, and that's it. And if nobody comes, that's okay. Right? So we don't want that. Okay? We want a situation where we're kind of on equal footing. All right. This thing, emotional intelligence. Now, when people collaborate, that can get sensitive, that can get, kind of interpersonal. They need to be able to handle, situations. Like when one person happens to be, testing the other one or kind of annoying or things like that. So again, an example for this of one way I've accomplished this, not in software. Again, going back to the race. We know there's going to be meltdowns. They're going to have us do stuff that we desperately hate and don't want to do but have to. How do we want to be when that happens? How do we want to be encouraging or supportive or this and that? Because we know there's going to be trouble. Agile teams call this working agreements. However, most Agile teams have really bland working agreements, such as core hours, right? Or show up on time to meetings. But there's very little by way of, if somebody is stuck, then what? If we did something really awful, will there be blame or will there be a conversation? Right? Stuff like that. And the matter of space. So a lot of companies going into Agile think we should have ourselves collaborative spaces. Let's rip out the old cubicles, well, apparently only some of them, and make the environment nice. This is the 9th condition. If you don't take care of the first 8, the space is not going to matter. In fact, it might make things worse. Because if people are not entirely crazy about each other, and maybe they don't feel safe around someone else, and this and that, putting them in a, higher stakes environment might create some harm. Now, the thing is, it's actually not the space that matters. What does matter is the possibility of rapport, that human thing where we communicate kind of subconsciously, even through eye contact, through gestures, and so on. When we sit together in the same space, we have the possibility of having that, right? That's how humanity works. Offices kind of did away with it. So we want to have the possibility of rapport. You know the difference if you've ever tried to collaborate with somebody over Skype, and then it kind of gets stuck every few minutes, and it's slow, and this and that. Or if you've ever had something that's more like a telepresence, where you can actually see the other person, it's like kind of live. Because when it's live, it feels like a proper conversation as opposed to an exchange of information. Okay? So it's good to have the space, but again, with some caveats, but this is not the first thing to go to. So I long ago, I stopped leaning on teams to kind of move in together as they started doing the Agile thing, because really I haven't seen this work really well if the team is not there yet. And they can develop good habits by just meeting frequently and having, the same space and the same focal points, like a board and things like that. And after a few weeks, when they kind of get the hang of it and don't hate each other, well, now we can move together. Okay. Any questions so far about these 9? Yes?
I look at that
Wait,
list.
1 second, very quickly. Yes.
I look at that list and it's daunting.
It is.
And I think of all the situations that I've been in the course of my career, and I'd say it's impossible to collaborate because balancing all of those things, having psychological safety and and yet fair evaluations is a really hard thing to do, and it requires some very special people. And in my experience, you don't often find that combination of people, or the combination of people with their
Yes.
emotional intelligence that are required to handle all of this. So it seems like this makes it a very high bar.
And I'm sorry, but you're right. No, seriously. Okay. Show of hands of who here, back in the office, you have a team that really collaborates a lot and well. Show of hands? Okay, so about 1/4 of the room. So it does happen. It does not happen all the time because for many, many years, we created environments that suppressed it. Now, for instance, psychological safety. You want some at the level of the organization, but this is more about just the interpersonal safety, right? You won't go behind my back after we work together. That should be reasonable to expect, okay? So there's that. Expecting each other to make valuable contributions. If we are in teams that ought to work together, that should happen, right? Also the matter of, compelling reasons to collaborate. It really has to do with how we design the work. That actually brings me to the next topic, which is the matter of the deterrence. And actually, the first one. So the list I'm going to show you is not sequential like the previous ones. The idea is that, again, once those conditions are met, these things might discourage people from collaborating, but they might still do that. But they have to be deliberate. Yes, question? Here.
On one of your slides, when you showed collaboration, you showed a basketball team.
Yes.
You also talked about your son working with a classmate and doing different amounts of effort and getting the same grade. And I was thinking the basketball team, it's sort of in reverse, but it's also an impediment to collaboration. Those 5 guys on the basketball team, one of them might be earning 5 times as much as the others.
Yes.
And the least earning may be hugely down, and yet you want to evaluate them as a team. So doesn't that get in the way? It might drive your son up a wall.
And he does play basketball as well, so yes, it kind of does. Look, he got the same grade as a classmate who basically did nothing. So it's not just about, he did 60 and the other one did 40. It was like really all and nothing, practically speaking. Now in basketball, you're right. And you would say, do we evaluate the team together? Actually, we don't, because the players get traded individually. My city took the NBA championship with essentially a rented player. Okay? I'm on video, so I should stop here. Yes?
Your son's not playing for the Raptors.
No, he's not.
Your son is playing on a high school basketball team.
Yeah.
On a high school basketball team, and I played a lot of basketball.
Yeah.
And I remember a guy coming up to me once after the game, and he said, "You only scored 3 points." I said, "Look at the scoreboard, we won."
Right.
And we won as a team. We didn't win because
Right.
because they held me to 3 points.
Right. And a team that's only focused on shooting baskets won't actually win because some players are enablers and some are not. And that's okay. So we don't expect people to have equal contribution, but sort of equitable, equivalent, something like this. It might not be even the same level, but again, they're all part owners in a way. So that's really what we're looking for. All right, so let's look at those deterrents. How we describe the work. when you think about it, you can talk about work at 3 different levels, or maybe 3 different aspects. One is the stuff we do. Second is what do we want to have come out of it, like deliverables. So that's the middle column, stories and done, and defects found, and deployments. Or you can talk about outcomes. How does our work make a difference? And all too often, I encounter teams and leaders who will only use the 2 on the left, right? We need to do the front-end coding, and we need to do the back-end coding, and what's your velocity, and points, and what did you do yesterday, and blah, blah, blah. And very much about, just moving work along, but not necessarily making a difference. And when you think about it, some of the common frameworks for Agile don't actually do outcomes particularly well. They're very much about, the backlogs and moving work along. And yes, there's a customer, and we talk about value, but there's nothing specific about outcomes and really getting teams rallied around that. And when a team rallies around an outcome, such as winning a game, the activities start mattering less, right? And then people can kind of start crossing the lines a little bit. Because when you talk about work really in terms of activities and outputs, people will assume that working solo is enough, right? If I do my piece and you do your piece, we'll integrate and all good. Okay? Often, and this is especially true of software development, there will be the assumption that specialization is critical, right? So if there's anything to do in the backend, we gotta get the backend developers. Gotta. Even if the work itself there is not, it's not rocket science, we can get somebody else from the team who can do competent work. So there's that. Here's another deterrent, the processes and the tools that we use. Okay, show of hands, who here uses the tool on the bottom left? You all know what it is. Okay, starts with J. Okay, starts with J. Show of hands? Of course. Okay, if I had $1 for every team that told me, hey, Gil, we can't collaborate because in Jira, we cannot say the 2 of us are on the story, I could buy myself a really good meal. Or we do Kanban, and we do swim lanes corresponding to people. And then it's not really surprising that we go to the stand-up and we have individual reporting, status-like. Or this not that great idea called the 3 questions. I remember 9 years ago I wrote an article about how the daily stand-up questions, the 3 questions, how they hurt teamwork. It's all I. Of course, it degenerates into a status meeting. What did I do? What am I going to do? What's in my way? Meanwhile, everybody else spaces out. Because why not? It's not their problem. I'm much more in favor of the Kanban style of the daily stand-up, which is, what can we finish? Between us, what can we finish? Right? What's closest to completion, and then what's next, and what's next? Sometimes I do other things, such as just, okay, team, we have 24 hours. What's the best thing we can do? Just wait for a conversation. Okay? So our processes and our tools can send us the wrong message. Okay, you go to the stand-up and you hear, I have a lot on my plate. Well, why do you have a plate? Right? It's also cultural. So the picture on the left, so I live in a country where the colors change and then the leaves fall. And around this time, lots of crews show up to move leaves from left to right and make a whole lot of noise and a whole lot of pollution. So the owners never have to see a fallen leaf. And the people in the house on the left, they get the crew shows up, cleans the lot, well, the lawn, and goes away. All the while, the person next door, because she's old and frail, didn't take care of this. Her leaves are going to fly over with the slightest breeze, but the crew does not care. It's not their problem. The homeowner never thought to do something about this, such as, can we get the crew to clear both places and split the cost, or something like that. Right? So there's that. Here's another deterrent. When people have too much to do, the natural reaction is to maximize labor. And the thing with collaboration is it looks like double the labor. You don't actually know if it would turn out to be double the labor. Often results in better quality, but you cannot guarantee that. Sometimes results in paralysis, right? So it's kind of unknowable. And one more. So a culture is very much determined by what behaviors get rewarded and what kind of behaviors get punished. But it's also characterized by the behaviors that are tolerated. And here are 3 that usually get tolerated. There's usually nothing for or against them, but if people have the headphones in the office. Anybody have them? Right? Or the cliques. Right? So the 2 guys who went to the same university and hang out together and go for wings and this and that and really like working together, but not with the other ones. Okay? The cliques. Or the 3rd one. So I work in a city that's even more diverse than Boston, and it is not uncommon. It's everywhere. You go to a tech team, and you will hear Russian and Chinese and Hindi and Serbian and Romanian and the occasional English. And when people use their home native language in the office, that shuts other people out. And this is a point that I can really relate with because, I've been living in Canada for 20 years, but whenever there's the occasional person who speaks my language, and there's only like 5 million people across the world who do that, that's home. And so I feel for people who finally get to use their native language and not struggle with an adopted one. But for a team, that does not help. And so when that behavior is tolerated, it really sends a message that it's okay, right? And then you essentially get the clicks. But the really bad one is this guy. Not actually being explicit, and when they're being explicit, not being authentic, about valuing collaboration. So in my previous talk here, 2 or 3 years ago, I spoke about mindset, values, beliefs, principles, and the values of Agile and this and that. And collaboration is definitely high up there. But unless you're explicit about it, people will make other assumptions. The typical developer, if you ask them what's important around here, they will say efficiency. There's requirements, we just need to knock them out. Very few people will say what's important to leadership here is that we work together. I have a client like this in Toronto. It took them a while to get to that point. Now it's second nature, but it was years. So there's very much the idea of, we need to really explicitly and authentically value this. Otherwise, we're typically just keep producing. Keep producing. And of course, we fall back into this one. We keep producing. We promise too much. We never really measure the workload or progress in this and that. And so we have to split up and do our thing. Okay. Now, before we do some work, because I want to give you the process, and I want you to do some thinking, if anybody here would like to kind of stay connected with me afterwards, there is, who has the, I had friendly volunteers who are going to help me pass this around. If you want, I write articles every 2-3 weeks or so. And if you're interested, just write down your name and you'll hear from me. And in addition, what I have for you is the process itself. Okay, so this is what we're going to do work with. So what you're getting there is a postcard with the process I'm going to take you through, really tying together what we've done so far. So you can start, improving collaboration where you work. Here's the first thing. The first thing on in that process is define what you want out of collaboration. Do you want it for knowledge transfer? Do you want it for quality? Do you want it for the cultural value? Do you want it for, speed of delivery? Do you want it for improving skills and people teaching each other? And the other thing is, what are the parameters around it? Is it optional, mandatory, only between senior and junior, between any two, across roles? So I'd like you to actually take a minute to think about this. What is your goal, and what are your parameters for collaboration in your team? Okay, going 3 times? Yes, please. Phil, yes.
Get your exercise. Yes. Speaking for myself, the things that I would most want to get out of collaboration, because I get to do it so infrequently, is better ideas,
Okay.
a chance to discuss things, and self-improvement, and a chance to work with people who are better than me and can hopefully
Okay.
learn and be better at what I do.
Okay. So if we did this at the team level, we could say, well, it's better ideas and it's growth, right? Okay. Does anybody have a different goal in mind for collaboration? Yes. Julie.
Raise the level of younger people on the team.
Help younger people up. Okay. Cool. One more. All right.
Connectedness, connection.
Increase the cohesiveness of the group. Okay, cool. So, second step, you want to identify situations that would benefit from collaboration, again, instead of cooperation or solo ownership. So when I started this talk, I asked you to come up with an example. Basically, you would make a little list for yourself of, where do we see this? So you don't try to boil the ocean, and you always try to start with something specific. Just as an example, let's say it's, just before a release, people hunker down, but they forget to tell each other anything, right? They don't really work together. They just do their own piece and kind of hope for the best. Okay, so we want to change this to have some more collaborative work. That would be an example. Would anybody like to share their example? What you picked here for this talk? Yes?
You've just added a user story or a group of user stories.
Right?
Just added a group of user stories. And in the environment I'm used to, you always do a level of risk management. What
Okay.
could go wrong if?
Okay.
How could somebody misuse this, and would that lead to harm? The collaboration brings out ideas about that kind of thing never could think of before.
Okay. Okay, good. So once you have situations like this, in the third step, this is when you do some of that harder thinking. So here I'm just going to give you a moment or so to think about this, but the idea is to sort of mentally survey your team and say, all right, working through those prerequisites, and you have them, I think, in the green box, on the postcard, on the green box. Which prerequisites are unmet? So for instance, if I just go with the example I just gave, which is, before release to production, people just hunker down and work solo, you might realize that, for many people on the team, the reason is that, they just have to do their thing. There's no compelling reason to work with anyone else. Or you might realize that, two there just don't really work together. They don't enjoy working together. Even if the work needs to be done, they prefer not to be near each other, right? Or maybe it's the situation with the space, right? So the space makes it difficult for them, right? They only talk through, say, Slack, right? So there's not much by way of, regular human conversation. So take a moment, think about your team, think about the situation that you've picked, and try to think about which of these prerequisites are typically unmet for them. Okay? Again, that's the green box. Okay, thanks. Yes?
Actually, it's the first, the one I'm looking at, it's the first one.
Already? Okay.
The
The reasons.
earliest prerequisite.
Okay.
No reason not to work solo the way we are.
And is that across the team? Is that across the team?
Yeah.
Okay.
When we operate, there's a stack of things to do. Somebody picks up one, does it, returns it complete, and reports on what was done.
Okay.
And so in that one, there's no reason not to work solo.
Okay.
So it's the first one.
Okay. Does anybody have a different scenario? Yes, and we'll get you a mic over here.
I can be loud. No,
Okay.
but you want to capture it from
Yeah,
film.
it's for the
You
film,
need
yes.
the- you need the
So
mic.
number,
You need the mic, because you want to get it on the film. Thank you.
it's number 8.
Okay.
Um,
Emotional intelligence.
Yeah, because what I feel is to be able to handle conflict and awkwardness,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes extremely sticky, especially when it's different cultures, it's a man and a woman, and
Mhm.
things like that, then that's the stickiest point I've seen.
Okay. So what do you do with this information? You look for patterns or consistency. So like we heard from the gentleman in the back that, it's the first one across the team. So that's consistent. And when you have a situation like this, where it's the same prerequisites for pretty much everybody, that means you have a systemic thing to deal with. Maybe how the work is designed, maybe how the team is structured, maybe the compensation system, maybe the process, whatever it is. But it's not personal. It is not personal. I just want to share a few examples from clients I've worked with where this was the case. One client in Toronto about a year and a half ago, they asked me to come in and coach them on stories and splitting and evolutionary design and things like that. And so I got to meet 8 teams for a half day each. And it was so consistent, it was shocking. The way work was designed and presumably agile, every person had a part to play. And that's it. Like, this developer, this architect, this tester, they just do their thing. And they move it on. And that's that. So very similar to the situation you shared. Another one. So one of the things I do these days more of is work with teams outside of software. And so I worked with a team of producers in a media company. They produce shows that go on TV. And very friendly people, very collegial, very invested in the organization. They know each other forever. And they do have good reasons to join forces, to have a backup for each other. So when one is swamped or on vacation or busy or a schedule ran over or whatever, they want somebody else to basically back them up. So that's not collaboration. For them, that was the second condition, right? The condition that it's not good enough to get to collaboration, right? And a third one, I'm sure a lot of you will find this familiar, a pension fund with investments. And in development, lots of collaboration. On the business side, like, portfolio analysts and portfolio managers and traders, lots of collaboration. You put a team together that has both IT and business, no cross-collaboration, right? And why? Not because of the first condition or two. It's because of the third, that making a valuable contribution, right? As far as the business is concerned, even developers who've been there 6 years, they don't know anything. And so how can they collaborate with them? They'll just tell them what the requirements are, right? So that's the case there. So you solve this at a systemic level. It's not about, talking to individuals and saying, I'd like you to, change your behavior a little bit. It's not about that. The system causes people not to collaborate. But what if you don't see patterns? What if you see a disparity? And again, I have a couple of stories there. At the same media company, actually, a development team that puts the news feed on their website and so on. Awesome team. Loved working with them. Smart developers. Highly collaborative, except the architect. So they had like 8, 10. At one point, they had 15 people. All very collaborative, all together, kind of loose process. All great stuff. The architect works alone. Because the architect never got past prerequisite 1. As far as she was concerned, there's no reason to join forces because they cannot help her. It's on her. The architecture is on her and on her alone. I don't know where she got that idea, but that's how it was. It's all perception anyway. The other example I already gave you, it's when I teach those agile engineering classes and people just stay put and kind of wait for people to come to them. So there's definitely people in the class who are very collaborative. They want to learn with others, right? Because learning with others is awesome. And not necessarily those few, right? So there's definitely some disparity there. And when you have the disparity, you have to solve this at an individual level. One-on-ones and coaching and this and that, or some other things. But you have to do this at a personal level. Okay, having done this, look at the deterrents, right? So that's your purple box on that postcard. And basically see, are you doing anything that creates them? Is your environment doing anything? Is there something inherent in the system? And so on. Okay? All of those deterrents, some are because of leaders, some are not. But all of them are on leaders to address. And we heard here that this is daunting. I would agree. So that's number 7 there. Prioritize your efforts and be patient. This takes time. It takes time. It takes help from others in the organization. Yeah. So that's that. That's just a recap. We don't need it. You have the postcards. Okay. Other things I have for you if you're interested. So that workshop with Johanna is coming back to Boston, so 6 months away. If you're interested, if you're somehow supporting an agile transformation, this is the place for you. So it's a workshop. It's not, we teach, but not a lot. This one we've been running for like 7 or 8 years now. I have a new book coming out. It's available electronically, but the print will be ready very, very soon. So the people that the world forgot in agile transformations, like most of the company, the non-techies. So what do we do with them? Okay, so that's what that book is all about. How we get agility to them without saying Scrum and without saying Kanban. Because Scrum rarely works outside of software, and Kanban is just too hard for them. So there's that. And like you heard, I got the these books here. So this is how to be agile, and this is how to lead imperfect humans. And so I've sold them here before, and you guys, or some of the people who came before you, were very supportive in my fundraising, which again goes to the race, over 4 years. We have some supporters here in the crowd as well. Over 4 years, we gave them $44,000. So this is one part of it. So if you're interested, 25, probably cash, doesn't have to be. And that's that. And I think I have time for questions. Do I, Richard? Sure. All right. Questions? With a microphone, which happens to be near you.
So in your example that you just gave with the architect working on their own
Mm-hmm.
and the wonderful team of 15 people, did the wonderful team of 15 people eagerly adopt what the architect did, or was there resistance because there had been no previous collaboration, so it was just coming from the top? Did they themselves put up the roadblocks of, we don't have the trust, the whatever,
they did.
that bonding that you described?
It was a tense situation because the architect was not sitting elsewhere and just handing down stuff. She was there with them all the time and friendly and this and that. So there was some tension because it kind of looked equal but really wasn't. There was definitely tension of we don't seem to have a voice here. There was actually a second architect who was also his own ivory tower, but in a totally different manner. And that created a whole lot of other trouble. So yeah, that was not a healthy situation. Phil.
I actually just had a thought based on an ACM program that I went to recently with
Okay.
school. A lot of people have the problem of getting everybody in the room to cooperate. One of the things that Jared did in his lecture, he talked about something called despicable design.
Despicable
If you're
design.
in a room where you're trying to come up with suggestions, some people are quiet, they don't have, but what you do instead, or what he suggested is, come up with ways to make, in this case it was a website, the worst possible banking website experience.
That should be
make
easy.
it work only in this browser and do all of your validation at the very end and make people restart. And
Okay.
when people are trying to come up with good ideas, well, somebody else may be better, but nobody will go and say, everybody will say, oh, nobody can make this worse than I can. And people start gleefully participating. And then at the end, you take all those bad ideas and reverse them. But at that point, you have a team of people working together.
So what I'm hearing you say is basically use something like gamification, in a way. And what a lot of team leads will do, and Scrum Masters, managers, they'll try to create, fun, creative environments where we don't just, say stuff and it's always sticky notes and, stuff like that. And that's great, and it helps with those prerequisites some. but not all of them, right? Because if I feel that, I need to be on my guard near you, the games won't help, right? And if I honestly don't think that you make valuable contributions, no game would help. So that's part of it. So I see this a lot. You mentioned banks. So the banks I've worked with, the way they assemble teams is basically like that, right? It's whoever's available. So people are kind of random to each other. And so you're starting from square one. So in Agile, we like to say, keep them together, give them a chance, they'll learn how to work with each other and so on. That's usually a good idea, but even that doesn't always work. There's no guarantee here. Yes. Yeah, we have a comment here.
And this will be our last question of the night.
Okay. Make it good.
Hi. I hear when you mention the problems, a lot of times you say, maybe they should talk to each other. So it sounds like part of the solution is talking, but just having a conversation is not the whole solution. It has to be a targeted conversation.
Yes. So when you have a conversation, it needs to be intentional, and the participants need to really recognize that the other side might have a point and is also human. So it's not just about, here's my information and why I'm right, and you'll share your information why you're right, and well, I hope it works out, right? So that goes back to that emotional intelligence thing, right? Can't avoid it. Yeah. All right, folks, thank you so much.